Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Riffhard Podcast. My guests today are Shavo from System of a Down and Morgoth, the producer, otherwise known as Morgoth Beats, old friend of mine. And they have a new band together called 7 Hours After Violet, who has a record coming out October 11th, 2024. So their band is really cool. Really interesting. Like, it's one of those projects where you cannot predict what's coming next musically. And I really enjoyed this episode because Morgoth and I go way back. I think 2013 or 2014, his old band Goliath drove from California to Orlando, Florida to come record with me. And I mean, they were unsigned. It's a lot of effort. That's a long drive. And that was one of my best experiences recording a band. I look back on it very fondly. It was one of my final experiences as a producer, and it was a good way to kind of cap off that part of my career. And to this day, I have watched Morgoth go on and create a career for himself as a producer and a songwriter. I mean, let's also include that he plays guitar in Winds of Plague, no small thing, but he's become well known for his production, working with all kinds of artists. So I wasn't surprised when I heard that he was working with Shavo. If you know Shavo, System of a Down. I mean, I kind of feel like I don't have to give an introduction to Shavo just because that band is legendary at this point. But if anything, anyone who's heard them or listened to them knows that System of a Down is kind of a no limits band, kind of like musically does the unexpected, and that spirit of things translates into this project. So it was a fun episode. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Riffhard Podcast. How are you guys doing?
Great. Good, bro. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here. So I spent the afternoon, well, not the whole afternoon, but some of the afternoon listening to the record so that I would have some frame of reference, because obviously I'm familiar with both of your works. Who isn't? But I wanted to actually know what you were doing together. And I was reading through the press release where you said that this was different than any writing, like what you're used to with writing sessions. I was just wondering, what are you used to?
So with System, I mean, rarely did a song happen in the studio. It was mostly stuff that one of us does at home and then brings it to the band and says, hey, I have a song, or I have a song idea, or I have something for a song. Never was it where, I think only one time back in the day in the 90s that happened when we were just starting out. But it was mostly contrived at home where we sat and we thought of riffs, which I've said in another interview recently, I have riffs like that ready, hundreds, literally hundreds, because I've been writing for the last 15 years since we have zero album, right, for System. But I've always been, and anytime something comes up that I think can fit the mold of System, I record it on my cell phone on a video, and then save that in an album, and then I'll come back to it and I'll organize it. You know what I mean? So I have that. But what happened with Morgoth and I was, it was so freeform. I walked into his home studio, grabbed a guitar, or was it a bass first? I don't remember.
Maybe a guitar.
Yeah, because I write on guitar a lot. I write differently on any instrument. Like, you give me a guitar, I'll write something different. And then you want me to change my style, I'll grab a bass and something else will come out in it, or a sitar or whatever. We have a lot of instruments. I collect instruments. He has a lot. So, but we started on the guitar, and just like I started riffing to his beats. And that's kind of ideal for me. I love to do that. And I kind of manifested Morgoth, I feel, in my own mind. Because I needed someone who knew the vibe, who also had another vibe that he can collaborate into the project, but who knew how to run the board, the programs, beats. That's the part I don't do. I've done before for other projects, but I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to freeform my riffs, arranging, songwriting, that, you know? And someone that could just capture everything I do in the studio and then we can arrange it later, which is, I said that out loud once, like years ago, literally happened. He's that yin to the yang. Like, I love to just freeform music and just like riff. And then when something, and things just fly out, every beat makes me write differently, right? And
yeah, it was like a more modern kind of approach where, you know, you kind of use the DAW as an instrument.
Yeah, I think the way that you described it, working in System, is the way that metal bands pretty much work, is everyone on their own. Like, there's not much collaborative writing in the sense that you guys did it, or in like the sense that pop artists do it, where producer artists are kind of in the room together. That I feel like with metal bands, you have either the band that jams together, which is pretty rare now, or you have,
like, I feel like bands like Clutch are like that.
Yes,
we're like that kind of the stoner.
Suicide Silence.
Suicide Silence does that too. Okay.
Yeah. But and you can hear it in their sound, right? Like, like they sound in a way that you could imagine them writing in a room. But I think that overall, it's everybody at their own computer sending files back and forth.
Yeah, with us, never. System never did the computer thing ever.
All right. Before we get back to this episode, I want to take a minute to talk about Riffhard. Riffhard.com, not the Riffhard Podcast, because this podcast is actually tied to our online school, Riffhard. And if you're new here, it's the world's best online school for modern metal guitarists. You know, we've got hundreds of lessons from guitar players such as Javier Reyes, Jason Richardson, Wes Hawk, Dan Sugarman, Miles Dimitri Baker. Man, I could just keep on going on. Aaron Marshall from Intervals, Mike Stringer of Spirit Box. I'm reading now because I don't want to leave anybody off. Dean Lamb of Arcspire. It just goes on and on. It's like all the best of the best. And you get tons more than just lessons with them. You get instant access when you join, but there's also all kinds of challenges. Like once a month, we do something like 10-day down picking challenge, or a 10-day tremolo picking challenge, or a 10-day alternate picking challenge, where we really guide you through the lessons and make sure that everybody is getting better. We're not just giving you these videos and sending you out into the wilderness to fend for yourself. We are right there with you. We also do 6 songwriting challenges. Like we have a monthly one called King of the Riff, where we give you a brief, like write a Spartan war anthem or write a technical death metal song with like some criteria. And there's prizes that include guitars and cables and all kinds of cool gear. And we also have private Facebook and Discord communities of like mind and supportive people, no assholes. That's really, really important to include. Now, with Riffhard, you also get a subscription to Nail the Mix. They live under the same site. So in Nail the Mix, you get to learn how to mix metal. You also get access to Buster Odoholm's Beginner's Guide to Recording Metal. So if you're just playing guitar and trying to record yourself, you have a band and you want to make demos for your band members, or you want to make your own demos, but you just can't get them to sound anything but garbage, or you just can't get past the starting gate, it's too complicated, we've got you covered. Buster Odoholm will show you how to do it. And also, if you want to take it further and actually learn how to mix, there's no place better than Nail the Mix over at URM Academy. And that's all included with Riffhard subscription. All right, so if that sounds interesting, you want to check it out, go to riffhard.com. I'll see you there. And let's get back into this episode.
System jammed a lot. Like every time we got into the studio to even like bring a song to the table, we would start with a jam. Like we're a jamming band.
Got it. Oh, okay.
That element to this band. Now that we're rehearsing next door. Like the wall behind me, the other room is a jam room, and we're set up there and we're practicing for these shows. And for future of us touring, you know, we're getting these songs down as a band now, because we wrote them in the studio, and then a year later, vocals were put on, which was a year ago, which was in October last year. And then now we're relearning those songs that we arranged online, you know, like not online, on the computer. But the way System did it was just like memory. It's always been memory, you know, Like,
Got
here's
it.
what I wrote. And then, so we what we did was right on the spot. And then when something came out that was interesting, I think we both knew and we're like, boom, that.
Yep.
Bring that in. So I'd play that and then we'd fit that into the mold and then we'd save it. And then I write something to go with that and then arrange. I've kind of developed in the 30 years I've been doing this. I've developed a style, I guess, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Of doing.
Yeah, I think people can know your guys' riffs by like just a couple notes.
Oh yeah, it's very recognizable.
Yeah. So it just happens, you know. And the hardest part was not to sound like System, because I do write for System. Like I've written a lot of songs for System, but not song full, but like riffs and parts and like arranging. So I just kind of do that, you know what I mean? And it was tough. I kept telling them, change the beat, you know, but he's like, the beat needs that the riff needs that beat. And I'm like, let's make it different so we don't sound like System, you know?
Yeah, I don't think this sounds like System, but you can definitely tell that someone who writes for System or is in System is in it, but it's not, it doesn't sound like a System side project or something. It sounds like its own thing.
I'm glad. Thank you for saying that, because that was our goal. Like, we've stopped a lot and said that's too much like System.
Too much. Yeah. Morgoth, you're a guitar player. I mean, it's interesting for me to call you Morgoth, but
yeah, I mean, you know me so well.
yeah, but that's how you're known. And I know you as a guitar player, but I know that when you started writing for people and going down this production route, that was one of the things that was that you were being asked to do for people, is write beats, but like with riffs.
Yeah.
Kind of like as a total package. So in this, where I know that you did guitar on 2 songs, but that overall you're not the guitar player in this.
I play. Well, I guess I'm playing guitar in the band. You know,
live.
Yeah, but I mean, in the studio, like you being a guitar player, when you're communicating to somebody, and you're not the guitar player, what is going through your head as far as like what you're trying to bring out of them? Like, are you thinking about it in terms of you, the guitar player, or are you thinking about it more like a producer or songwriter?
I guess a little bit of both. So for like this, it would be a lot of times where, you know, he would start like a riff idea and I would just kind of try and like direct him towards like what sounded cool, what doesn't sound cool. You just kind of like go by my taste. You know, I'll be like, that's cool. I was like, oh, maybe not that. And then when we lay like several ideas down, like I would usually take the song home and then lay a structure out on how I thought the structure should be. Then I'd show it to him and then he would have ideas on like how to arrange it differently. So I was trying to think of it more from like a songwriter perspective, you know, and then I would like take some of the riffs and like chop them up and turn them into like breakdowns or like variation riffs. I would record like some layers on my own and write like the album's very like symphonic, you know, like there's keyboards and like orchestra stuff on just about everything.
There's all kinds of stuff on it.
Yeah, and I played all that stuff on like a jamstick guitar too. So because like guitar is just probably instrument wise what I'm best at, but a lot of what I do is production work, you know, like I'm probably more of a producer than like the most insane technical guitar player in the world, even though I guess the wind stuff is pretty technical, but you know, like I think of myself more as like a producer than anything.
I know what you mean though. I think just to be able to survive in metal, you've got to have some level of technical skill that's, you know, that's impressive. But I know what you mean by like, there are some people out there who are like Olympic athletes on guitar. That's that's their whole thing.
And then when I produce in other genres, I find like the bar for like skill level in guitar is usually lower. So I'm usually like impressive in other circles by being able to sweep pick and, you know, just stuff like that isn't really that crazy in metal. But, you know, in other disciplines, it's a little crazier.
Yeah. So, Shavo, you were saying that, you know, kind of going on the idea of Morgoth as a producer, you were saying that if you felt like you were running out of steam, he was there to basically get more out of you or to keep you going. So
You did that a lot.
how does that dynamic work?
You did that a lot because, as in, like, I can remember a handful of times where I was like, I'm not feeling it today, you know.
And I'm like, you'll be fine. You move your fingers around.
Move them around, and all of a sudden the riff of the fucking week came to it. Can I cuss? Like I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Came out like the best riff like that I thought of that week happened that day because, you know, it's all in your mind, man. You know, and sometimes I'm like, I'm not feeling it because, you know, daily you come in every day. It's you're not creative every day, but sometimes you just got to do it for it to come out. You know, like I strum away and then shit just flies out. It's weird. It's crazy, and I'm very grateful for having that ability to do that. You know, and sometimes I think it's not going to happen, and then he would say, I needed him on the side to be like, no, bro, you can do this right now. Like, we're here. Like, it's like going to the gym and saying, I'm not feeling it at the moment. I can't work out. I'm feeling tired. But then once you start working out, you get a workout and you're like, oh, wow, I feel accomplished.
That's fine. Yeah.
Exactly that. It's identical.
His like baseline level of like playing and writing is already like sick and unique, you know? So I was like, you can literally just like move your fingers around a little bit and I'll like just be like, do that, don't do that, you know, and we'll come up with something like that is valuable. You know, it's like a muscle if you just constantly work it out.
It's a muscle. You're right.
You know, the thing about inspiration, I think, is that it's awesome. It's awesome, but it's almost like a bonus. You know, if you have inspiration and you're feeling it and motivated by the inspiration to get to work, awesome. But I feel like if people just wait around for that to happen, it's like the amount of work that you'll be able to get done is going to be way, way less than what you would have done otherwise. And also you're not going to be putting in as much time and probably won't get as good.
Yeah.
And then inspiration, I've noticed, happens more often when you go and like create the situation
just do it,
which will show up. Yeah.
For us, it was just like stumbling on ideas, which is basically what I've realized like a lot of songwriting is, especially when you do it like the way we did it, which is in the modern form where, you know, you play a riff and then you put like a cool drum beat and you experiment over like a couple different variations of it, where it's stuff you can't do as easily by jamming in a room. You know, you get stoked after you hear like your idea fleshed out, already sounds good, already sounds like mixed and like huge and everything, you know, like I'd throw like the 808s and all like the fun stuff in already just to like hype him up. So he'd hear it and just like, oh, this sounds great, you know, and then it like, oh, then, you know, he gets the idea of like maybe this riff next, you know, and then we just kind of just linearly go through the song and then eventually, you know, we put it together.
And what you said about the inspiration thing is so true. I say this all the time. It's not about what mood you're in, you know, because you're always not going to be in the mood to work, right? It's just like that mood to work is always a thing where you're just like, I'd rather not, right? But once you do, it just, you know, you say to yourself, I can't believe I wasn't in the mood a second ago.
Yeah.
A lot of people lose in life because of that, because they follow moods. You're not supposed to follow your mood. You know, you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to know what it's called discipline. Like, you know what you got to do and you just do it. And, you know, so much is gone from people when they do go.
That's why I always tell people like to learn to record themselves, because just something about being able to hear yourself back instantly already sounds good will inspire you.
Absolutely, man.
Inspiration, like make it yourself, you know.
The idea of being basically a slave to your moods is so destructive, because moods can be
like that.
They can get triggered by anything, and they also can change on a dime, and it's such a unreliable trigger for working. It's better to just pretend like you're not feeling anything and just get to work.
Just do it.
Yeah, and then the inspiration will show up. Something that you were talking about is getting it to where it's already sounding pretty good. And that's kind of the reason that vocal producers will give the vocalist, you know, an in-ear mix where they have all kinds of effects on and will already sound like a rock star just coming through the headphones. Even if it's not the mix that's going to be on the album or anything, they'll give them a very... Yeah, exactly. And then they'll start performing like themselves. And I think it's kind of similar with writing, to where if you are excited by what you're working on, you're more likely to, I guess, I call it turn the light bulb on, but get the light bulb turned on with ideas.
You don't have to imagine what the demo would sound like. It's already like 80% there, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Do you think there's any value to the old school idea of if you know, play it on an acoustic guitar, if you had to be able to reduce it to an acoustic guitar and a vocal?
I love that.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you have a good song that is good just with an acoustic guitar, it depends on the genre too. It's probably hard to write like a beat down hardcore song and like envision it as like a full thing without like the rhythmic. But you know, if you have like a song, like we have songs.
I think our band can, every song, even the heavier, crazier, even like Abandon, can be done on a cool flamenco guitar, and you can totally, like, I feel like every one of our songs can be done acoustically and sang, and it would be remarkable.
Yeah, so cool song.
I think that, because the way we did the songs, like my personal influences are from like ABBA to Zappa, so it's like A to Z, you know, and it just comes out within the music, the arrangement, you know, because it's very like song formatted. It has like the verse, the chorus, the verse, the breakdown, the ending chorus, big chorus, ending book end, intros, outros. I just write like that naturally. It's kind of from the school of Rick, you know, Rick Rubin. I was in the studio every time he was, just to like study and like learn. I would just watch, you know, and just everything, even if it was a vocal day, a vocal week, I just watch him do it, you know. So I kind of
take advantage.
Yeah, I took it in. It was like school of creation, you know. It was really cool to be around, and I'm blessed for that, you know, and I'm very grateful for having that experience be a part of my life for so many years, because it really fed me for the future, you know, for this situation, for example, you know. And it was like, that's why we're both producers on the record. He's a total modern style new producer, where he does the beats, he does the sounds, he does the orchestral stuff, and I'm more of the old school style producer, where I'm like, let's arrange this a certain way, let's lengthen that part, let's shorten this part, sing this over there, don't sing here, keep this part empty, kind of the Rick style producer just gives opinions. And then the Morgoth style producer is more of the guy that also does hip hop and like creates the beat in general, like, you know what I mean, kind of like forms things. So both of those style of production is on this record, and you can tell, I think, if you hear the record a few times, you could tell that's both are thought out.
Yeah, and like I'm so familiar with his writing style and his band, you know, I've been like listening to him since I was like 10 or something, and you know, some of the earliest riffs I learned were theirs. So he has like, they have certain things they do, they have certain you know, tendencies on like how to A-B riffs and stuff. So when he would write, I already knew
where I was going.
Yeah, I already knew like his style. So it was just kind of me like, okay, how do we do like a more modern version of, you know, what you already do?
Yeah, we, like I said again, I'll reiterate, we wanted to sound as far as System as possible without bending,
without sounding like System.
But I still wanted
sounding like yourself.
Yeah, I wanted to sound. I didn't want to go to the left and completely just, because I've done that my whole career out of System. Every side project I did, like the thing with RZA, the thing with North Kingsley. I've done a lot of side songs with here and there with like Killer Priest.
Yeah, well, he's done a lot of hip hop too, which is also where it ended, you know.
So, but this was the one where it was like felt natural and good to do what we're doing. It was just like, it's in my DNA to do what we just did, you know. And I can't wait to do it again. Like, we're already 6 songs into the next record.
You know, that's actually part of, I think, the modern style of being in a band and production is writing fairly fast and not waiting very long before having the next record, like, as opposed to older school where it can be years and years. And I don't mean System in particular.
No,
I just think it's
decades.
Yeah, I'm not referring to System. I just mean like the old school album cycles.
Sure.
You know, could last 2 to 3 years or more. And the idea of having a record started or halfway done or even done while the previous record is just in the launch stage is totally a new school thing. But I talk to more and more friends whose bands are like 1 or even 2 records ahead of their current release, which is really cool and nuts to think about it compared to how it used to be.
Fully, and we are the yin and the yang when it comes to the old school and new school. So we do butt heads sometimes, but it's in a good way. Like before we were practicing for these songs, Morgoth wanted to get into the studio, start writing more. And I said, put the brakes on, bro. Let's get this going. Because there's also something else that I think about. Those songs were written within the cycle of these songs, you know what I mean? But they were just different. And we said these songs should be left for the next album. And then the thing is like once you like play these, like, don't say like, I said like, and there's a sign that says don't do it.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
that's a great sign.
Yeah. So once we practice these songs and play them live, there's like this development thing happening, right? Within your brain, within your style. And you will progress more and write differently after doing a run with these songs rather than writing more like these songs. I want the next record to be advanced over this one. We can't write the same record over again, just in different songs and say it's a new record. A lot of bands do that. They'll write 30 songs, split into 3 records and say, we already have our first 3 records, which is cool if the listeners want the same thing over and over, just in different titles. Now, I want to do a different. Of course, we'll stay in our style and zone because we're developing that as we speak. We're still developing our style. We're still developing a sound that 7 Hours has, right? There is a distinct sound on the record once you have the full record. I want to develop that into something bigger, progress. That's the word. I want to progress. And I feel like the progress will come once we played these songs on tour, at shows, listen to it, the album's dropped. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's just what happens in
see how people react.
Yeah, this is from my personal experience within the years.
Yep.
So that's why I was like, wait, because we can go in and write, and I know we can do that because every day we can do a track or 2. We can't. Him and I together is dangerous. We in the studio, we could rock like crazy. But to do it the right way, I feel like we should wait a little, and he agreed. So we left those 6 tracks. We're going to come back to those 6 tracks. A few of them could be reworked a little bit. A few of them are done for sure. Like Moody's done for sure. Like,
Yeah. Also, when we were writing this album, the initial idea for it was that it was going to be like his solo record. And, it was going to be like his just solo band sort of.
That's what it was when you told me you guys were working together. That's what you told me it was. You told me you're doing his solo record.
Yeah, and then like the initial idea was do like a DJ Khaled metal sort of thing and just get like a crazy guest vocalist for all the different songs and do like crazy combos of like this person and the same song. But can't really tour with that. And the more we wrote, the more we got cool members involved, like where everyone has their own sort of world as a musician, and it was kind of a super group. He definitely like pushed more for it. Like, we should just make this a band.
I like bands.
And
I didn't want to do a solo record. I was getting pushed to do a solo record. Not that I didn't want to do it, sorry. I did want to, because majority of the riffs are coming from me and all that, but I still I enjoy being in a group. I enjoy the collaborative efforts of everybody. I enjoy working with Morgoth. I enjoy his input. It's something personal for me. I like that. And then plus I didn't want my name in the back and like Kiss, SHAV. I didn't want that. It's awkward for me. I'm not that guy. A lot of people love that. They're all about that. You know what I mean? Me. I'm never the me guy, So, I mean, it's even tough doing some interviews for me talking about me so much, So I was like, I'd like a band, bro. Let's make a band. Yes, it could be revolved around my music, which is great, and my decisions. It's still our band, but it's a band, but it's guided by me. You know what I mean? That's for sure. Right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and but other than that, I like the unit. I love the guys in my band. I can't wait till we tour and we share tour experiences together. That's cool for me. I like that.
Yeah.
Spoken like a true bass player, I think. I just got to point out, because I think one of the reasons bassists in metal tend to kind of suck is because they're not usually bassists. They're usually guitar players. And I know you play guitar, but they think like guitar players when they're playing bass. Whereas thinking like a bassist, I think it's this whole other role.
It is.
It's like, I'll call it the secret weapon on a metal mix, but you can't think about it like a lead guitar player.
No.
Or a vocalist or whatever.
The reason why I became a bass player was that, because as a guitar player early in my career, I was looking for a bass player for a band, and I couldn't find a bass player that I was a bass player in a guitar player's body. I knew what a good bass player should do, but I couldn't find anyone else with the same mentality. It was either people that were starting out and they just started picking up a bass and can't really follow a song without stopping in the middle of it, or they were virtuosos thinking they're either Les Claypool or they wanted to outdo the guitar player. And that's not how you get a band. It's like a team, you know. It's like you can't have two wide receivers. You can't have three quarterbacks and no wide receivers and no blockers. You're not going to go anywhere. Your team's a loser team if you have amazing three quarterbacks. You know what I mean? But you don't have anyone to throw the ball to, and you can't block, and they're coming in and rushing. So everyone needs to love their part and know their role. It's a stew, you know, it's a meal. And instead of searching far and wide and looking for that bass player that might work, I just traded in my Randall half stack for a new bass, and I said, I'm going to get into this, and I'm going to play the way I think a bass player should play. It took me a while to get it out of the guitar zone, but I was always the guy that liked to be like together with the kick and the snare and the groove. It's like, I feel like a good band, the bass player and the drummer are the meat and potatoes of the meal. Good meat and potatoes, you have a good meal. And the guitar player and vocalist kind of are the salt and pepper. Kind of like this is something we've talked about with System all the time. Like the salt and the pepper, you can always change the spices, make it a little saltier, make it a little spicier. But if the meat and potatoes are on point together, it's going to be a good meal. Yeah. And so that's the mentality I've always had as a bass.
I think you can really hear it on like albums like Toxicity and stuff. Like I think that's one of the reasons that's so timeless is the bass plays such a key role in the groove.
You know, I was different in that era than I was in the Mesmerize Hypnotize era. I wasn't as locked in Mesmerize Hypnotize. I had kind of checked out because there was so much turmoil within the unit that I was just kind of doing my own thing and saying like, dude, I don't want to deal with this. There was a lot of this, I don't want to deal with this depression going on at the time with me, you know? So I let Darren do, Darren had to do some, I just was like, I didn't want to learn. Like I sort of got, I was checked out. It sucked. I've never been like that before or after that. It was just that era where I was kind of checked out. And I think you can tell even the way the songs are, the bass is not as prominent as it was on Toxicity or the first record or Steel, you know?
Yeah, I think
Well, there's this attitude thing towards being a bassist that totally makes sense, that if mentally you're not there, the group cohesion isn't what it was before, and the bass player role involves group cohesion and is kind of the glue for the group, that it's not going to work as well or be the same as when that element is healthy.
And a lot of people don't see that.
Sense.
Yeah, a lot of people do not see that. They look at the bass player as like, oh, he's just a bass player. And I never cared though. Like I said, I don't care, bro. As long as I'm happy and the shit sounds good. And you can think whatever you want of me. Plus, I'm old enough now where I don't give a fuck, right? It's like, I'm going to do what I do. You like it, great. You don't like it, great. I don't care. You know what I mean? I'm just blessed to be doing what I did at 25 again at 50. Like, I'm doing it. Like, I feel it. Like, I have a goal. I'm building something new and I believe in it. You know what I mean? It's the same kind of energy I had when a system was starting, and I built that. I was managing for the first 3 years. You know, I'm the one that did all the flyers. I'm the one that booked all the shows. I'm the one that did all the art. I'm the one, run around. I'd get Kinko's. We didn't have computers and stuff. You know, I'd go to Kinko's and I'd print with my glue stick and this paper cutter, I'd tape it all together, Xerox a bunch of copies on one, and then cut them up into 4 pieces. You know what I mean? Like that's the stuff, make stickers at Kinko's, So I'm that guy again. And it feels so good. And it feels like I got this new young, like, attitude. It's
I'm curious, after you listening to the album, did like anything stand out to you? Like that was your favorite?
The opening track, do you mean as far as songs go?
Yeah, just songs or like just like the style and general.
Because we switched up on stuff.
There's a lot of vibes. There's a lot of vibes on it. My favorite stuff is the highly layered stuff, where I think the opening song is in lots of ways my favorite blend of it. But the thing is, as the record goes on, there's stuff that you don't hear in that song also, which is really cool. Like the vocals going to the, what is he pitched down? Holy shit.
Sailor's like 6'9" Samoan dude. So he has a sub in his, that was one of the reasons we picked.
Jesus Christ. It sounds insane.
Yeah, because I was producing the new Left to Suffer album that came out like a couple weeks ago, and we were just looking for a singer, and we had tried like one or two people and it didn't work. But I was recording him, and on the new Left to Suffer album, he sings a lot, where I was like, wow, I didn't know you could sing like that. And just recording him, he just had the most like dynamic range of a singer, screamer in general. I was like, this dude can do lows lower than anyone I've ever recorded before, and he can do high and higher and like everything in between. And he was a good songwriter.
I mean, the
crazy
song that we gave him was the last song on the record, Feel. We gave that song to him instrumental, and he sent us back this demo vocal. Yeah. The guy's singing it in falsetto, like on a high, like, yeah. And I'm like, wow, bro, this guy is doing it. Like, he's killing it. Like, if he could do that, he could do anything. And he was like the guttural, low octave growls to the high end singing, sounding like a canary. It's just incredible. So he was the guy. And then right away I knew he was the guy. We needed that. Our music has many different facets and dimensions. So he fit the mold.
Yeah. Perfect. And then when we added like Alejandro in with it too, that was a similar dynamic. I was like, I love how his band has two people who are great singers, complement each other. So they're constantly like harmonizing together and stuff and doing things that you can't really get with just one singer. Having two good singers like the Eagles or something like that is, a special thing.
Alice in Chains.
Yeah, exactly. That was
Beatles, even Fleetwood, like a lot of bands that have two singers are just great.
Yeah, there's something cool about it.
The harmonizing is necessary. It's so cool. And it brought me home when we got Alejandro, because then there were these choruses that were harmonized. It's great. And I love when one sings and one screams and they harmonize a scream and a vocal singing together is really cool. There's some, like the third song has that, Cry has that, a bunch of songs have that where they sing together, but one is like on this low guttural, like evil dark, deathcore thing, and the other one's singing like the Beatles,
Yeah, that's one of the things. Speaking of what I really liked about it was the vocal range, and I don't mean like octave range, but that's cool too. I just mean the range of different things happening vocally. So it's like really interesting in that you don't get, it doesn't stay on one thing long enough to get bored of it, but it also doesn't sound ADD or anything.
Right.
It all makes sense.
Yeah. We tried to still make like songs.
Yep.
With also having some element of, impressive vocal feats,
The sitar layers are really cool too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
We're looking at it right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of a trademark.
Yeah. It's interesting how I did those was like, he has an electric sitar, which.
Oh, those are cool.
Really cool. And then
a Dan Electro.
Yeah. I did that. And then it's
the one that's in a guitar kind of setup.
Yeah. They call it guitars. Yeah.
And then it's also a layer of like a Digitech whammy with the octave up layer with it that makes like a kind of a sitar-y sound, and also a on the MIDI guitar, it's like sitar plugin too. So it's like a few different things to make that one sitar sound.
And I've been using that sitar since a Chosen record I did with RZA. We were listening back to it because I have it. It hasn't been dropped. We never dropped it, and everyone says we should have, but it's been years, right? Almost 18 years now. But it's got a lot of that sitar in there.
Yeah,
the sitar is kind of a thing that I love to bring in and kind of.
We have lots of. Also, another thing too I wanted to keep was the Armenian folk vibe. Yep. You know, like every song has a lot of live percussion that me and our drummer Josh like recorded him playing like lots of different percussion layers in it, and there's lots of all the external like MIDI instruments going on are naturally like natural instruments, you know, sitars and ouds and stuff like that.
The oud's an Armenian guitar. It's like something that reigns really close to my heart.
Yeah, so that was pretty like intentional.
Do they have sitars in Armenia?
No, but it's a Eastern, we're a Mediterranean country. But because there's been a lot of reading back and forth from different countries and stuff, you know, there's a lot of like Persian Armenians, there's Lebanese Armenians, there's Armenian Armenians, Russian Armenians. Because after the genocide, a lot of Armenians fled our country to live, you know. This was after 1915. So when that happened, we became multiracial. Other music seeped into ours. Other cultures came into ours.
That makes sense.
So that's what happened. And then when we got back to Armenia after the coast was clear somewhat, all these cultures kind of blended together, kind of like a melting pot of that region.
That makes a lot of sense.
You know, Southeast Asia, like not Southeast Asia, but like Eastern, like the Russian areas, the Mediterranean countries, the Italies, the Greeks, the Greeces, you know, like, and including the Middle Eastern areas, you know.
And one thing I've always loved too about his style is, and like the band's, their style is that it's, if you were to play the same songs as if you listen to Armenian folk music, it's like very much in the DNA, you know, like the drum grooves are similar, the riffs are similar, like the scales they're using are very similar, where, you know, if you just put a metal band behind it sounds, that's where, you know, the inspiration comes from. So it was cool, like writing with him, because obviously, you know, I've been a fan forever. So getting to be like, oh, cool, like let's do, if, you know, your style, like modern, but keep that like core sound to it. It's like, so if you muted the heavy guitars and the drums and stuff on the album, you would still have, you would have kind of like a folky, like Armenian vibe under the songs, you know?
And it's not intentional, to be honest with you. I don't intentionally.
In your DNA.
I don't intentionally do that. It just happens.
It's just there.
That with Iron Maiden.
The sitar lends itself really well to I guess the melodic choices from the Armenian folk music side of it. Even though, that's why I was curious, because I don't associate sitar with Armenian folk music, but it works. It works
with a different sound. It's not supposed to be Armenian. Like I said, I'm not intentionally trying to create Armenian.
Yeah,
I have a lot of different instruments. We have a lockout in the other room too. We have 3 rooms here, and that has all my instruments in it. And there's like little balalaikas and little cool things that I just kind of collected throughout the last 30 years of touring and stopping and stuff. And I kept everything. And so right now we use the sitar because it was here and available.
Yeah. And it sounded cool. Really, never sounds cool.
It wasn't meant to be Armenian and then done with the sitar. It was just kind of like I played the sitar.
Yeah, it sounds
and cool. Like adding those little tones with the bang, you know, it just kind of works. And I'm very used to it. It's become close to me.
If it sounds cool, it is cool.
Yeah. We need to for the next record. We got to get a new so I could jam that.
I'm down.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where there are certain instruments that work really, I mean, this is going to sound kind of dumb, but there are some instruments that work well with certain types of note choices that weren't part of what I guess geographically where the instrument came from, but it works for whatever reason.
like on the album, there's a lot of minor, but there's harmonic minor, and there's a lot of like chromatic passing notes.
The use of chromatics is one of my favorite things on it, like, because that's actually how I think a lot in terms of harmonic minor, and then also chromatics, and blending the two. That's just kind of really natural to me. So hearing that on a record feels like home to me as far as note choice and harmonically goes.
Yeah, like rhythmic choices with the guitar. Yeah, there's like this little gallop, but a different type of gallop. Not like the Iron Maiden gallop, but a different vibe.
The gallop mixed with like the offbeat hats and stuff. Like
the offbeat hats are my favorite. I always said throw a disco beat on. So I love the disco beat metal.
Yeah, it's cool. And the chromatic thing, to me, that's kind of the key signature of like beat down, death metal, deathcore. Like if you're trying to make something gnarly, you know, kind of throwing the scale out and doing the chromatic thing is usually like your best bet. So we definitely tried to push, like, to be as heavy as anything modern, you know, like to keep that intact, like to play the game of like being a really heavy band, you know, on top of having cool melodic stuff. But I wanted us to have stuff in common with, you know, like bands like Knock Loose and
I mean, that's just in my DNA as well. In System, my favorite things were those breakdowns we had, and it started back in the day when, from like Dead Embryonic Cells, the breakdown in Dead Embryonic Cells. I feel like bands listened to that and kind of started careers from it. You know, like where it
absolutely
riff sounded like the middle part of Dead Embryonic Cells, and so that's always been something I love. Like Angel of Death, the middle of Angel of Death, the middle of Rain and Blood. Like there's these like moments where you just want to, like our first tour ever which was Slayer and Sepultura in Europe, or Slayer and Clutch in America. I played my show, and then I'd wait for those moments of the set where Slayer did Rain and Blood or Angel of Death, and I'd be in the crowd pitting, like always. I was either behind the drummer, Paul Bostap, watching, or I'd be in the pit moshing with the kids, you know, because I get the opportunity to see them every day. Slayer's one of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
So,
breakdowns are
breakdowns, like, so,
and you shouldn't be afraid of them.
No, I love them. Like, so when I like-minded guy that was like, let's have breakdowns, I'm like, of course, like that's a given. Yeah, it's a given. We need breakdowns. We need more breakdowns.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just fun.
The next album will beat the ones we did.
Yeah. We need to have better shit. Like this is.
Yeah, there's something interesting you just said. I guess my three favorite bands, and I don't consider these three bands to be nu metal, but from the nu metal era, would be you guys, Slipknot, and Korn. And the thing that sets those three apart is you can hear what OG metal it's pulling from. And I remember hearing Monkey and Head saying that their whole thing was really similar actually to what you just said. They wanted to do Morbid Angel, but only the slow parts. Get rid of the solos. Get rid of the solos, get rid of the blast beats, and just have the slow. What if Morbid Angel's slow parts were a band? And that was kind of the idea for Korn. And so you using the Sepultura or the Angel of Death idea and being like, what if it was a band like that pulls from like this kind of element of this OG metal stuff? That's interesting because you hear it in Slipknot too, that pulling from like Cannibal Corpse, which I think set the three of your bands apart from just about everything else I heard in that era. Yeah. It's just interesting to hear you say that.
The first time I heard Korn, I heard them at the Whiskey by accident. I was promoting the first band before System. I was promoting Soil, and I went to a big rock show at the Whiskey, and it was Deftones and Korn, and I just tripped. And I thought of Korn. I thought of them as that slow parts of Sepultura. I thought of it that way. I was like, those are grooves, like, you know what I mean? That whole thing that's how I felt. And I was like, I went back and said, there's this band. I told the guys from System, because we were just writing music at that time and rehearsing. We were nowhere, like we didn't even think we were going to get signed. We were just kind of making music together, you know? And we didn't know anybody in the scene. We didn't follow up anything like that. We were just but I loved it because I was managing as well. So I went back and I was like, dude, they got these grooves, it's kind of cool.
Yeah. I think a lot of too, like where we related was we like bands that have like a wide sound, like stuff that some of the heavier stuff you'll hear and stuff that some of the more melodic stuff you'll hear. So we were definitely trying to like push both sides of it, like not being afraid to make something super halftime and really, really slow, and then stuff that is just clean guitar and like pretty vocals at the same time. And I think nowadays too, especially more than probably ever, that's kind of a recipe for success, is people really respect diversity. You can see it in literally every top band, from like Sleep Token, Bad Omens, Spirit Box, the list goes on, that they have the capability of doing both things. And I think kids nowadays, if you're only soft, they're not really as interested. If you're only like all the time heavy, I mean, there's obviously exceptions to that, like Knock Loose, Kubla Khan, etc. But it's harder to get over, So if you can do all of it, why not?
I love our heavy melodic stuff.
Yeah.
The heavy melodic stuff.
Well, there was a time, I think, where if you were a screaming band, having singing worked against you. But I think, like to your point, I think that the audience now is so much more diverse that you don't have that same kind of gatekeeping or weird rules. There's just weird metal rules.
Yeah, almost not having screaming now is a more risky thing commercially than it is to have screaming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
I'm
trying to think about that. Yeah, I think you're right.
When we dropped the first song, there's the middle part of Paradise, where Alejandro's singing and it just becomes angelic. And I remember watching like the reaction videos to it, and a few of them were like, wow, this is my favorite part. And then there was ones that were just like, I hope they don't use this style much within the album, because they only want the heavy Taylor Barber vocals.
Mm-hmm.
And, to each his own. Again, this is where it comes down to it, where it's like, we do what we do and you like what you like. And it's great. We're not going to change. We never write to the audience. We can't do that. I don't want to ever write to the audience, because then I'm not writing for myself. And it's very personal.
You just got to trust your own taste. If you think it's cool.
Yeah, that's a Rick thing. Rick Rubin also said that. He's like, if you write for the audience, you're fooling yourself. And you're doing yourself a disservice. You're not writing for yourself. Art comes from within. You need to write for yourself. And if you approve, then it's a success at that point. Then you just release it and let it go and see what happens to it. Then the audience comes second, always. The audience needs to come second. If we didn't have that mentality with System, we would have never been System.
Yeah, on paper, it's so weird.
They didn't know what the style of System. They didn't know that one day they're going to like it. They hated us. In the beginning, we'd get booed everywhere. Like all those Slayer tours, they would throw shit at us and boo us off, trying to boo us off. We would never leave, but they would try to boo us off the stage. Like I still have cuts all over my body from being shirtless and European, that big ass coins coming at me, and I'm bleeding and I'm still playing. I don't care, So
that is hard.
Like us. They hated us. They really did. It's like they were given like the death things, like in like Czech Republic, or just got SS flags in our faces and stuff. But crazy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that is very alive and well in the European metal scene.
Eastern Bloc.
Yeah. It's they're into that. The thing that I think is really dumb about writing for the audience is that it makes it, if you're just thinking about it in terms of business, it makes no sense. Because you can't predict what people are going to connect with. And if you try to write something based off of what people will possibly connect with in the future, as opposed to just follow what worked in the first place, which was your own instincts, and then it doesn't work, what did you wasted a bunch of time.
You're lying
people need to get comfortable. People need to get comfortable with the idea that you can't predict anything.
Well, if you're chasing a trend, you're already too late. Like at that point, like whoever created that trend was just doing what they liked, and then a bunch of people are just trying to copy them. But that band's probably already moved on to what the next cool thing is.
Yeah, for sure. You need to be a trendsetter.
I'm sure you guys have been around bands or musicians or in situations where people are thinking or pushing to change parts based on how people will react.
We didn't have that because I've been there, but not project because this project, we did our own thing. We just did whatever if we liked it, it didn't matter, it didn't matter. We just put them on the record. We made every choice. We didn't have a label. We made the record before there was a label. I started my own label, signed a band from my label, signed a label to another label. So I kept creative control in that way. I've been through this for 30 years. So I knew what to do to make sure we keep the creative control of the band.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want a label. The one thing we did and listened to them, which I still think is kind of a mistake, but it might have not been because everything we can pivot. We dropped Radiant second, the slower song, and I feel like that should have been left for later. I should have, because we have a lot of heavier, badass tracks that should have come out, but we're dropping them still. But it was just their idea was drop something like that so they know you have different flavors, which did work. But to drop it second after a song like Paradise is pretty crazy. It's pretty extreme. You know what I'm saying?
It's almost like our third song is the first song now because their palettes have been totally
pretty much
white,
it's two different bands. If you listen to Radiance, you would never think the same band is singing Paradise.
Yeah.
Right?
They're very, very different.
Very different. So I feel like the next one coming out Friday, the day after tomorrow, is a mixture of that. So you get what we're doing.
Yeah. It's the second song Alive.
The second track is dropping now. The second track on the record is dropping in 2 days with a video.
And for people who are going to watch this, it would have been 5 days ago. This is being, for people in the future, this is being recorded on September 18th, 2024.
There you go. That's right.
Yeah.
On the 20th, we're dropping. We dropped Alive last week.
Yeah. The future self.
Future self. Yeah. We hope you like it.
I'm sure they will. It's really, really sick. Right. And I think people who listen to the podcast or know me know that I don't really compliment people unless I actually think that. I find if I'm in a situation where I don't like somebody's music, I find ways to get out of having to say that I like it.
I was going to ask you that as a host. How do you do that? You talk to a lot of different bands, and sometimes you need to talk to people that you might not particularly be into, but you need to keep the conversation going. That must be tough.
It's harder when my company does online education. We show people how to mix metal. It's something called Nail the Mix, and when we have bands on Nail the Mix that I'm not into, and I have to sit there for 8 hours while I'm hosting that is kind of brutal because I'm having to engage with their music, and I'm trying to ask the mixer really interesting questions and really get deep into it when I absolutely hate the music.
Wow.
That's a little bit harder, but on a podcast, it's a little bit easier because, even if I don't like somebody's music, that doesn't mean I don't like them as a person or something, so, and that it doesn't mean I don't respect them either. So there's always, it doesn't mean they don't have anything interesting to say. So I'll avoid the part of it that I'm not into, and I'll try to find something interesting to me about their process so that it's still a good conversation. So I think you can have a good conversation with just about anybody. So, and I'm not doing this as a fan of anybody. I guess that's part of it too. The podcasts are not meant to be from a fan perspective or anything like that. So, and it's also not a promotional perspective either. So I'm just trying to have really good conversations with people who do interesting stuff. And so then that makes it a lot easier.
That's interesting because, since I've worked with you as like a producer, for my old band, Goliath. I think your producer hat is probably a little different because when you're producing, you're a lot more like blunt and to the point on whether you think something is dope or not.
Yes. Yeah. But also as a producer, you have to learn how to like pull yourself out of a situation too. And you might not agree with somebody's decision, but at the end of the day, it is their decision. So you have to be able to both be into something, but also pull yourself out of something and then also see the potential in something. And with a conversation, I find it to be super easy.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. There's gotta be something the person has to say that's interesting.
Do you miss the producer role sometimes?
No, not at all. Not at all. No, because dude, I only produced so that my band back in the day would not have to pay to go to the studio because it was so expensive, and no one could produce metal back in like, besides the really big dudes, nobody on a local level knew how to produce metal in like 2002 or 3. So I just learned how to do it, and one thing led to another. Band got signed, like ended up in like bigger studios, and one thing led to another, but I was never like into it. And so when I started the companies, and I had to make a decision on how I was going to spend my time, I knew the companies would never grow unless I made them number one. And it wasn't even a tough decision to just not produce anymore. And now being able to do the companies and the band is perfect,
right?
Because that's what I wanted to do originally. So no, I don't miss it whatsoever.
Yeah, that's sick.
Yeah, but I think we're out of time. So I want to thank you guys very much for taking the time.
Thank you for having us again, bro. This was fun conversation. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. It was a pleasure, and good luck with the record, and congrats on it as well.
Thank you, brother.
And maybe I'll see you guys on the road.
Yeah.